Hi, welcome. In this video, we will discuss some basic principles of creating perspective drawings. And we will take a look at some of the best practices or common mistakes together. Then we will introduce some trending styles in architecture and landscape architecture rendering that can actually add a unique flavor or style to your rendering. So first, perspective basics. So there are different types of perspectives. For example, linear perspective and aerial perspective. So in linear perspective, which is the most commonly seen type of perspective, objects appear bigger as they get closer to you and smaller as they get farther away. So there are two main types, one-point perspective and two-point perspective. So on the left, it's a one-point perspective. The parallel lines in a one-point perspective converge to a single point on the horizon. So this is called the vanishing point, this point here. And then this line here is called horizon line. So notice that for a one-point perspective, it depicts the situation where you face, say this is a building. This face of the building is directly in front of you. You face this face of the building, the blue face of the building. Whereas in a two-point perspective, you are not directly facing any face of the building. So you're facing more of a corner or the edge of this building. You're not directly facing either of these two blue faces of the building. And then in a two-point perspective, the parallel lines converge at 2 points still on the horizon line. When we as viewers are on the ground, this is what we see. So this is examples of one-point perspective, and the horizon line is then the line that goes through our eye level. So when we lower our viewpoint, meaning if we view it from below, this is what we see. And you can see that it's more like viewing from below, and you can actually see the bottom face of the boxes, and sometimes called a worm's view. And if you raise your viewpoint, meaning viewing from above, the horizon line now is also raised, and then you see this kind of setting, and this is called the bird's view. So these are the examples of two-point perspectives. Still the same, this is when you're viewing on the ground, street level. This is viewing from below, and this is viewing from above. So on this perspective here on the right, looking at the height of the people, what can you say about it? So let's say this is an image I found online, and the source is actually acknowledged here. So we're just borrowing a part of this image just to discuss it, because they already have the pergola, the reference lines created for us. So if this is an eye level perspective, do you think the height of these two people are correct? Okay, so if this is an eye level perspective, then given that these two people are adults, let's say they have similar height, and then their eye should be roughly at the same horizontal level here. And this line is the horizon line that goes through the vanishing point. So then we now know that this person is a little bit too high if this is an eye level perspective. Okay, So that's a common mistake that people make in making perspective drawings. You're making an eye level perspective, but all of your people's eyes are at different levels. That's a common mistake. You would like people's eyes to be all on the horizon line. This is an example of previous students. So because when you compare this person's eye with this other person's eye, you can see that the closer the person is, the lower his or her eye level. So you will then know this is not an eye level perspective. Rather, this is a bird's eye, a slightly bird's eye kind of view. I would say that most of the times when you're making perspectives, eye level perspectives are more comfortable for the viewers because they actually represent the real views the best. So when making eye level perspectives, make sure that every person's eye pretty much line up at the horizon. So here on the website Sketchbook, they have well illustrated examples that show the process of doing a one-point perspective on the street. You can see that the process is like, first you decide on the horizon line, the vanishing point, and the main parallel lines that form your street. And then based on that frame, you fill in the buildings. And then you also fill in the trees, the light posts, and other stuff based on this frame. And then if you have people, you will see that because this is an eye level one-point perspective, pretty much every person's eye is at the same height. And then you can fill in the details there. So now we've talked about making perspective drawings based on, one-point or two-point perspective, the horizon lines, the technical aspects of it. And then we will talk about composition of perspectives. So this is a rendering by Atlas Lab. So it's a California landscape architecture firm. You can see that this rendering is quite nice in balancing the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. So this is what I really like about it. You can imagine that if you remove the foreground, the rendering would look less interesting. So the foreground tells some kind of programmatic story about your design. So if you remove the background, then your rendering appears less realistic or complex. You would like the depth of the view rendered by having 3 different layers: foreground, middle ground, and background. But you can see that the background is lighter, it's weaker in color contrast compared to the foreground because you don't want it to be competing with your foreground. This is also an example I really like. This is designed by McGregor Coxell. They actually have a lot of really nice renderings. You can take a look at the designer's website. The couple in the foreground tells a compelling story about the ecology because what they are doing is interacting with the ecology here, observing the ecology. And it actually directs your attention to this area. That's the key element of the design. Notice that the most colorful place is actually the vegetation, in the foreground, okay, close up. And you have some things in the background that isn't too colorful or competing, but still have plenty of detail there. A lot of times if you're doing 3D modeling, you can stage a scene for a specific perspective. So staging a scene means that you don't have to include the same level of detail for every single corner in your 3D model. Especially when you're doing like a large or medium scale design, you don't want to include the same level of detail for every part of your design. Rather, you can decide on the point of view, the angle and depth of view, and then just include the full set of details in the areas where you will generate the perspective. So just like stage setting, you would like this perspective to represent some key design features that you would like to convey. So now we've talked about, the composition. I will show you some of my favorite perspective drawings mostly from well-known design offices. So these are renderings from Sasaki's showing the greenways. So you can see that it clearly shows the material changes in the different kind of linear space. So the linear space are emphasized. This is a project I really like by Olin. It's for the National Mall. And you can see that, the continuous surface here that's used by a lot of different kind of activities. This one is a little different. You can see the most apparent difference is that the people are not like in like the realistic, the actual photos of people, but white or gray shadow-like figures. Notice that this decision is made depending on how realistic or artistic your rendering itself is. So if you have a super realistic rendering, your paving material, plant material are all very realistic, it may not be the best to use shadow figures like this. But if your rendering is a little abstract or artistic, like what we have here, then it works really well. So these are Balmori drawings, and you can see that the comparison, they are mainly using the perspectives to show seasonality, how different weather conditions in different seasons cause changes in the experience of the space. So it makes sense that the people are just like matching, like auxiliary kind of features in the renderings. In addition to considering the seasonality, seasonal changes, there are other kind of dynamics that you would like to consider in your renderings. For example, the diurnal cycle. You can have morning, noon, afternoon, sunset, dark. The different kind of light conditions based on the diurnal cycle of your scene. So especially in urban design, this is used a lot. If you design a mixed-use area, the idea is that there are a variety of different programs, functions that attract activities 24 hours a day, like around the clock kind of space. So if you have that kind of space, then you'd like to make renderings to show activities not only during the day, but also, in early mornings or after dark. We are increasingly recognize that it's not only the permanent kind of functions of space are important, but also program elements, events, the temporary kind of arrangements of programs and space usage that are important to your design. So if your design involves certain cultural events, recreational kind of events, you can show them. It's becoming like a very important component of your design.